The United Nations announces that warring parties have agreed to a 2-month truce starting from today. As peace consultations continue in Riyadh, observers say the Yemeni consensus on those talks has exceeded all expectations. The suffering of displaced people in Ma'rib aggravates as the conflict extends throughout the governorate. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rushan Fouad. The United Nations Special Envoy has announced that the warring parties have come to an agreement on a 2-month truce starting from the April 2. According to Grunberg's statement, all military offensives will halt during this period. More details on this are in the following report.
For the first time in years, the warring parties in Yemen's 7-year conflict have agreed to a nationwide truce, which will allow fuel imports into Houthi-led areas and some flights operating from Sana'a airport. The UN-brokered deal between the coalition and the Houthi militia aligned with Iran is the most significant step yet towards ending a conflict that has killed tens of thousands and pushed millions into hunger. UN Special Envoy Hans Grunberg said the 2-month truce would come into effect and could be renewed with consent of the parties. Grunberg added that the aim of this truce is to give Yemenis a necessary break from violence, relief from the humanitarian suffering, and most importantly, hope that an end to this conflict is possible. The UN-brokered truce has been welcomed by many countries like the United States of America, the UK, Saudi Arabia, Norway, and Egypt. Also, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres welcomed the agreement by the parties to the conflict in Yemen on this 2-month truce.
I thank my Special Envoy Hans Grundberg and his team for their tireless efforts in the pursuit of this agreement. The parties accepted to halt all offensive military air, ground and maritime operations inside Yemen and across its borders. They also agreed for fuel ships to enter into Hodeidah port and commercial flights to operate in and out of Sana'a airport to predetermined destinations in the region. They further agreed to meet under the auspices of my Special Envoy to open roads in Taiz and other governorates in Yemen. The truce, which has the possibility of renewal, coincides with the start of the holy months of Ramadan. It opens the door to addressing Yemen's urgent humanitarian and economic needs and creates a genuine opportunity to restart Yemen's political process. This truce must be a first step to ending Yemen's devastating war.
Yemen's economy and basic services, including health, have collapsed, leaving 80% of the population of around 30 million dependent on aid. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said the truce must be a first step to ending Yemen's devastating war, urging the parties to build on the opportunity to restart an inexclusive and comprehensive Yemeni political process. The deal includes halting offensive military operations, including cross-border attacks, and allowing fuel ships to enter Houthi-held Hodeidah port and commercial flights in and out of the airport in the capital Sana'a to predetermined destinations in the region. Grunberg said the parties agreed to discuss opening roads in Taiz, effectively under siege, and other Yemeni regions. The UN and US envoys had been trying since last year to engineer a permanent truce needed to revive stalled political negotiations. The Yemeni government, which the Houthi took from Sana'a in late 2014, said earlier that it would facilitate arrangements for release of prisoners, opening Sana'a airport and allowing fuel vessels into Hodeidah. In addition, the foreign minister Ahmed bin Mubarak added that they announced the release of the first 2 fuel ships through Hodeidah port. Lastly, Yemenis still have hope for a better future, and they deserve to have a peaceful Ramadan as well as a peaceful life.
The leadership of the coalition welcomed the 2-month truce announcement made by the UN Special Envoy. The coalition stated that the ceasefire comes in the context of the Saudi initiative to end the Yemeni crisis, to reach a comprehensive political solution in Yemen. This comes in conjunction with the implementation of Yemeni consultations in Riyadh. the wide participation of Yemeni political factions in Riyadh consultations has indicated a unique consensus among Yemenis to end the war and suffering of civilians across the country. Such consensus has been praised by many observers in the region and globally. The following report has more details on this.
Yemeni groups taking part in the Riyadh dialogues have demonstrated a high level of agreement and enthusiasm for their country's future. The Gulf Cooperation Council is hosting the discussions at its headquarters in Riyadh. They began on Wednesday and will end on April 7th. The GCC's Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs and Negotiations, Dr. Abdelaziz Hamad, stated that these Yemeni parties' agreement exceeded expectations. He stated that the Iran-backed Houthi militia still has time to participate in negotiations, and other parties who have encountered roadblocks on their way to Riyadh still have the chance to participate. We hope that they can make it and that they have the window to do so before the end of the week, said Hamad. He added that the Houthis have been invited and their presence helps Yemen unite ranks. If they choose not to attend, Yemeni parties already present represent 90% of Yemen's political society, and they will come up with positive recommendations, according to Hamad. He provided a synopsis of the second day of discussions. According to him, discussions were extremely successful and everyone agreed to work together for Yemen's future. The discussions on Thursday focused on political, economic, security, social, humanitarian, and media elements of Yemen's crisis. The conversations were primarily concerned with analyzing the current condition of things. We were astonished by the parties' agreement and their interest in Yemen's future, Hamad continued, saying that the meetings were friendly and cooperative. He indicated that foreign groups will begin voicing their opinions during the discussions next week. The negotiations will continue on Sunday. They will face the trials that have been set before them. Participants will meet with Yemen's government on Monday. They will revisit the concerns discussed during the first week on Tuesday, and suggestions will be made on Wednesday and Thursday. Despite the discrepancies between the parties, Ahmed Al-Saleh, one of the participants in the political track, stated that the second day of discussions went smoothly. He stated that the conversation was moderated and that everyone had the opportunity to discuss their views openly. Everyone was accepting of all differences and disagreements. They were patient, especially when it came to long-standing disagreements, he noted, while emphasizing the extremely optimistic odds of reaching an agreement on important remaining concerns.
Government forces stopped Houthi attacks south of Ma'rib. Field sources said that the government forces thwarted the attacks starting from Thursday evening until dawn today. The battles resulted in the killing of 13 militants while government forces shot down a Houthi drone in Rish area. Local sources said that the Houthi militia has arrested a number of sheriffs in the Mar Governorate. The sources added that the arrests came after their absence from a meeting held by Houthi leader. The meeting was intended to compel the neighborhood sheriffs to push residents to enlist their sons as recruits in the Houthi militia ranks. This comes in conjunction with the escalation of the Houthi militia's attacks on Ma'rib fronts during the past 2 days and its expanding human and military reinforcements. As the conflict enters its 8th year, the suffering of internally displaced people in Ma'rib aggravates. Qa'ad Saleh is one of those displaced people who has been crushed by the war and its atrocities.
Despite his old age, the war imposed on him displacement and the search for a safe shelter. Qa'ad Saleh, in his 70s, is one of the thousands of displaced people who sought refuge in Ma'rib. Today, he finds himself standing among hundreds of women and children, protesting the inaction of relief and humanitarian organizations towards their tragedy.
Our situation is really dire. We keep hearing about international aid agencies, but we've received nothing. No cash, no mattresses. Winter has aggravated our suffering. Heavy rains fall on our heads. We've no shelter. Aid agencies visit us, and once they take our names, they disappear. We never see them again.
Safe shelter, water, and food have become a far-fetched dream for displaced families in Al-Hadi camp, east of Ma'rib. Displaced women reveal that they are unable to keep warm under tents that cannot shelter them from frigid cold or blistering heat.
I have 3 kids and my husband is dead. We lack the basics of life. We have no mattresses, no blankets, nothing. We hear about international aid, but none of it has reached us. Our tents are shredded. We don't have access to gas, and our tarpaulins are in pieces. We have nothing to obscure us from the sun, and when it rains, we are direct targets. Humanitarian organizations have neglected us. They visit and they don't supply us with any aid.
Al-Hadi camp, located within the square of the International Organization for Migration, is an interventive measure by relief organizations that got neglected as time wore on, with people saying that the last food basket arrived more than a year ago. Despite repeated appeals from the people, organizations have failed to provide basic services and sustenance to the camp.
يوجد في هذا المخيم 270 أسرة. مخيم حصون الهادي.
Husun al-Hadi camp houses over 270 families and it's split into 4 squares. We call upon international organizations to fulfill the camp's needs, from shelter, medical assistance, life necessities and sewing supplies for women so that they are able to patch up shredded fabrics.
Thousands of families are caught between a brutal war and a desperate need for survival after the criteria for human aid distribution has baselessly shifted. Aid distribution has become a chaotic process with needy people going without much needed supplies.
April 2 marks the International Day of Autism in Children. In line with that, an event was organized in Hadramaut to raise the awareness of the local community on this disease. The following report has more details on this.
Autism spectrum disorder is a disease that many Yemeni families lack awareness about it, which has severe consequences upon their children who hold this disease. On the occasion of the World Autism Awareness Day, which falls on the 2nd of April each year, Hadramaut Autism Foundation organized an awareness-raising cultural event aimed at educating the community about the concept of autism spectrum disorder, its causes and symptoms, and how to train a child with autism and deal with this category.
Coinciding with the International Day for Autistic Children, Hadramaut Autism Foundation launched its first awareness campaign, aiming to shed light on this disease as these people suffer from marginalization and discrimination.
Many people lack knowledge about this disease, which aggravates the problem among those kids who hold it, especially in a war-torn country. Autism spectrum disorder is a condition related to brain development that impacts how a person perceives and socializes with others, causing problems in social interaction and communication.
I have never heard about autism. I usually see children who have it, but I don't know how to deal with it.
Lack of awareness among the parents of children with autism and their ignorance of this disease and its danger to their future comes as a result of the parents' reluctance to enroll their children in training and rehabilitation centers and institutions for dealing with autistic patients.
My child suffers from autism since he was only 2 years and a half. He studied at this foundation and he benefited a lot by learning here.
This cultural awareness event has included informing citizens of many rehabilitation and training programs for autism spectrum disorder, and the organizers have distributed brochures and indicative posters that would help them play their role towards their autistic children. Contribution to spreading and raising the level of cultural awareness among community members about such a disease and calling on parents to quickly enroll their autistic children in training centers give the parents a great opportunity to rehabilitate, change behavior, control, and significantly reduce symptoms of the disease among their children, which is what the patient's families should be aware of in order to preserve the lives of their children.
Coming next. As today marks the first day of Ramadan in Yemen, food prices have witnessed incredible rise.
خايفين على الأطفال حقنا من الضرب اللي طلعنا فوق، ما حاجة أسكن فوق خالص، كلهم بالمدرومين.
عن الحرب يعني دائما طلقات، دائما خوف، يعني مش دار إنه مناطق أخرى يعني ما في بهمش حرب. الآن تفكيره كله إنه كله حرب، كل الدنيا حرب.
خافنا مصيبة القتل، نصهم قوم مقالي، نصهم نتعالقوا. القضايا هذه ما تصل جنبها تطير حمامات خلفها. رجعنا كده بقوها لك، إحنا معانا حنمشي، نحن بقوها يعني.
Welcome back. United Nations said that 25.5 million Yemenis are under the poverty line. They further stated that this number is out of a total population of 30 million, and they need support more than ever. They added that these are not just numbers, but people are facing one of the worst humanitarian crises. The war in Ukraine has caused severe shortage in wheat and oil supplies around the world. The United Nations warns that this would aggravate the humanitarian situation in Yemen. The following report has more details on this.
Yemen's famine to increase fivefold this year. This came as a statement in a report issued by 15 UN agencies. The organization stated that 19 million people are likely to be unable to meet their minimum food needs during the second half of 2022. In Yemen, 2.2 million children, including 538,000, are already severely malnourished, and about 1.3 million women could be acutely malnourished, according to the report. World Food Programme has warned, if the ongoing situation continues in Yemen, it will be hard for Yemeni families to survive. WFP further added that it's running out of funds, which will force the organization to cut part of the food assistance in Yemen. According to the organization, this reduction came at the worst time for Yemeni citizens, who depend mainly on WFP meals to survive. The food crisis has also contributed to the rise of malnutrition rate in the country. The report stressed, the war in Yemen is the main driver of hunger, and the crisis is likely to deteriorate due to the war in Ukraine. For Yemenis, the timing couldn't be worse. As families try to put food on the table, they are being hampered by the knock-on effects of a serious escalation in fighting alongside the continuing deterioration of the economy. Even before fighting broke out in early 2015, Yemen was one of the poorest countries in the Arab world, and now for 8 years, Yemeni people have been suffering from food shortage and scarcity due to the ongoing war, and higher food prices will push more people into the brutal circle of hunger and dependence on humanitarian assistance. UN Humanitarian Coordinator for Yemen said, peace is required to end the food shortage crisis, and all parties to the conflict should lift all restrictions on trade and investment for non-sanctioned commodities to overcome the crisis.
Today marks the first day of Ramadan in Yemen and most countries. It has been the 8th year in which Yemenis welcomed the holy month during war. Food prices have risen dramatically. People cannot afford securing basic items due to such an incredible rise. The following report has more details on this.
7 years of war, a global pandemic, and inflation caused by Yemen's crumbling economy and exacerbated by the Ukrainian war have made it exceedingly difficult for people in Yemen to purchase basic commodities. Now, with Ramadan looming near in a country where 99% of the population is Muslim, Yemenis will struggle to put food on the table. Most Yemenis' daily wages are not enough to deal with the rising cost of living, and that makes shopping for essentials in preparation for the start of Ramadan a difficult task. A humble diet of bread and water is difficult to attain for many Yemenis who live in homes without running water, who have to trudge through the blistering sun while fasting to get to the nearest well. Bread has also become a luxury, as Moscow's invasion of Ukraine has prompted a global increase in grain prices for countries who rely on Russian and Ukrainian wheat. Furthermore, already high prices are expected to soar under increased demands, meaning many families would have to go without basic supplies like sugar and cooking oil, which are holy month staples. Yemen's Pledging Conference last week has amassed $1.3 billion in donations, a number which falls short of the requirements stated by the humanitarian community in Yemen by around $2.9 billion. The budget shortage means many families will be left to starve during Ramadan. Due to the funding gap, the World Food Programme has no choice but to ring-fence funds for 5 million people in Yemen who are on the verge of famine, leaving the remaining 8 million people with only half rations. Yemenis aren't just fasting, they are starving, without the promise of a hearty meal to tide them over.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. The United Nations announces that warring parties have agreed to a 2-month truce starting from today. As peace consultations continue in Riyadh, observers say the Yemeni consensus on those talks has exceeded all expectations. The suffering of displaced people in Ma'rib aggravates as the conflict extends throughout the governorate. This is the end of the news. For more, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Yemen Today English. It was Roshan Fouad. Thank you for watching.